All righty, thank you very much. So this is going to be kind of like an infomercial. So it's kind of a break. So I have a tendency to speak quickly, and with the time limit, I might speak even more quickly. So better to finish early than to have time remaining on the clock.
Do you see the clicker there?
Yep.
Okay, great. Use the down arrow.
The down arrow.
Is it upside down?
Second ahead of ourselves. So basically I'm here to talk about our book. This was a book that we completed in 2018, and I do want to, in full disclosure, say basically we copied another book. But it was a book that actually saw at a conference. It was actually created for the city of Beverly Hills. It was the Watershed Approach for Beverly Hills of all things. And I saw it and I just thought it was fantastic. And the person, Pamela Bursler of Green Gardens Group in Southern California, is the person who actually put that the actual book together. So she gave a presentation, and I approached her afterwards and said, I want that for our agency. And she was delighted to do it. So basically, full disclosure, about 85% of the book is the exact same book that they have, because the principles and the concepts apply universally. But the other 15% or so was actually making it for our area. So making a plant list and other things that are applicable to our area. So I do want to give credit where credit's due. So it is in your bags. I see some people. Feel free to pull it out and flip through it because it's more interesting than me talking about it. But I do want to give credit where credit's due. So on the inside front cover, there's some acknowledgments and Pamela Bursler things in there. Two other people that were this book could not have happened without them. One person is Charlotte Torgovitsky, who some of you may recognize her name. She's a board member of the Marin chapter of the California Native Plant Society. She's a wealth of knowledge. Many of her personal photographs and photographs of her garden are actually throughout the book. So without her and her input, it would not have happened. Also, Charlene Berge, who's a former co-worker of mine. She was in charge of all of our large landscape programs in the Conservation Department. And she was a wealth of knowledge as well. And so basically between the two of them, my job was actually to go find smart people, knowledgeable people, and bring them in and make this book happen. And I think I did a pretty good job of picking the right people. So basically, this is a concept, and everything that's been discussed already today, this book kind of encompasses that. And so basically, it's a guidebook in the true sense of the word. So it's meant to guide you through the process of creating essentially a sustainable landscape. So the watershed approach is just kind of this particular phrasing given to basically sustainable landscaping. There are other terms that are out there. You've heard bay-friendly landscaping, or Russian River-friendly landscaping, or fill-in-the-blank friendly landscaping. And they're all basically sustainable landscape concepts drawn out with their own, just basically using their own name. So it's meant to be a source of information and hopefully also a source of inspiration. Just looking through it, I remember when I first grabbed it and looked through it, there were several pages. There was a page on pollinator gardening. There was a picture of a hillside that's in there, and I thought, that's my backyard. That's what I want to know about. So I was inspired enough to make the book for our customers. And it's dedicated. It's actually geared toward the homeowner, because residential homeowners are our biggest sector of our customer base. So it has a plant list in the back. It's over 110 water-wise or climate-appropriate plants. Those plants is a point of interest. The plants never repeat in the book, so if you see yarrow on page 3, you're not going to see it again on page 23 or 47 or 52. That was intentionally done so that there was many examples of plants throughout the book as we could get to the different sections. It has landscape design tips, and the design is just a crucial part, and where you should really put a huge amount of effort and time into the design, actually, of your garden. There's gardening how-tos. For instance, if you have a lawn area and you want to convert that, or at least part of it, to a more sustainable landscaping, it talks about things of how to do something like sheet mulching, and walks you through the steps of that. And it also has in the back a resource section of local nurseries and other resources, and I put a little asterisk in here because as soon as you print a book, it's out of date. And roughly about, hopefully there's no connection to this, but about 3 months after we printed it, one of the gardens, the book, The Garden Center in Tiburon, closed. So I'm hoping that wasn't a reflection of us or the book or mentioning it. We're keeping track of that and see what kind of mortality rate we have. I should point out that the nurseries that were selected with the input of Charlotte and Charlene mostly were ones where they felt someone could go and actually talk to a knowledgeable person, not just, I'm not going to mention any other names, but not just kind of a factory type of store where you're going in. We could actually find somebody and actually give you good horticultural information. So you're all supplied a free copy here today. The book is also available for free at our offices. So if you take the book home and your friend somebody looks at it and says, hey, this is great, where can I get it? You can go to our office in Puerto Madera and just walk in and ask for a free copy. It's also been made available to local libraries. So if you want to go check it out, you can go grab that. There's about 30 copies floating around the different libraries. And also, you can download it, and we actually met somebody today who said they had already done this. You can download a PDF version, electronic version, to our website at marinwater.org/WAL for Watershed of Personal Landscaping. So basically, it covers a lot of the topics that have already been discussed today about paying attention to the design and the features of your landscape, what you have and what you want. Building healthy soil, retaining water on the property. That's basically, like in this picture, either having a rain chain that goes down into a dry creek bed or swales or something else to keep that water that would otherwise run off your property. To kind of, slow it down and spread it out and let it sink down actually into the soil on your property to recharge that soil. And ideally, in choosing climate-appropriate plants, ideally California natives. Because as has already been discussed today, if you have the native plants, they've evolved with the native animals or wildlife, and so they then support that particular, the particular wildlife regionally here. And also, we talked about managing supplemental irrigation, and that's an important concept. Is basically every time you irrigate, that is supplemental irrigation, because natural irrigation is rainfall. Rainfall doesn't supplement what you do with your sprinkler system. It's the other way around. So basically, if you have lawn or something else that's not climate appropriate and you're irrigating it throughout the summer, that's because it's not used to or adapted to our Mediterranean climate. So that's even important even if you aren't going to change your landscape. It's really, really important to look at your irrigation system, because most irrigation systems overwater anywhere from 25 to 50%. Just from inefficiencies. So it's something that we are quite concerned with. So this is the table of contents. Obviously, you can just kind of look and see there's a bunch of different areas. The book is 70 pages long. There's no way I'm going to go through, or you would want me to go through, page by page of this book. What you could do, if you're interested in, is we have, unfortunately, there was a pamphlet that didn't get into your bags, but there's a series of 6 classes that are available that is through the College of Marine Community Ed. So it's not in your bags, but if you have something you want to write down, you can go to marincommunityed.com. You can just search for the term watershed, and it will pull up a class list. So there's 6 classes. They're about 2.5 hours each on Saturday morning. 4 of them take place at the Kentfield campus, and 2 up at the Novato campus, because they've got organic gardening out there that's instrumental in those particular classes. I do want to point out the 2 instructors, they actually approached me with the idea of creating this class. They created the curriculum, but the Watershed Approach book is the class textbook. So it's really nice to sit back and have somebody come and say, hey, I did all this work for you. That's great. So one of the instructors is Charlotte Torgovitsky, who I mentioned on the technical advisory committee for the book. The other is Talia Drahim. Talia is actually in the audience today. She's one of the instructors. She's a landscape designer, and both Charlotte and Talia's home gardens are going to be on a garden tour. It's on Saturday, May 2nd. It's a regional garden tour, and it's free, but you do need to register before you go on that garden tour. And I just wanted to point out that if you, that if you are interested in taking these classes, that the feedback from Talia and Charlotte I got was, although you can take them individually, you can kind of look and see if there's one that actually speaks to you, if they're interest to you. They basically stated that the first class is really fundamental and other things build on it. So if you're thinking about taking at least one class, really think about taking the first class as a foundation. And they found that out because actually the first class was canceled because of the PG&E power shut off, and they couldn't reschedule it. And so going through, they realized, oh, that was actually really important because the different concepts build on that. So hopefully we'll get through that any problems this next time. So class starts on April 4th. It's 6 Saturdays in a row, except for this particular Saturday that's right in the middle, and that's because both of the instructors, their gardens, are actually on the tour. So let's see. Okay. She might ask, why is a water district promoting a watershed approach to landscaping? Why are we promoting? We get this sometimes actually from other employees as to why there's a department within an agency to try to use less of what we sell, so to speak. And it's interesting when I point out to people, we're not Coca-Cola. We're not trying to make profits here. We're a not-for-profit agency, and we're trying to do the best for our customers. So I'll start with this. So actually, how many people here are MMWD customers? Okay, quite a bit. Any guesses? So we have technically, say, 3 sources where our water comes from. Any guesses? Anyone want to shout out?
Reservoirs.
Yep. So basically, there are 3 sources. Our local reservoirs up on Mount Tam, and then there's 2 other that are outside of the Mount Tam watershed. Russian River through the Sonoma County Water Agency. We have about 25% of our water imported from them. And
It's done something weird.
that's weird. Well, that one up there says recycle. I'm not sure where it came from.
It's just
It's weird. Anyway, and then about 2% comes from a recycle plant, and that water then goes generally toward irrigation. But basically, almost all of our water, whether it's our local reservoirs or Russian River, that comes from rainfall, and very localized rainfall. So on average, we get about 52 inches of rain up in our watershed at Lake Lagunitas at our rain gauge up there. But it varies very widely. And oftentimes, if it's not going to rain, we're completely through an irrigation system, completely through an irrigation season, I should say, before we may even know that we're actually in a drought, or that we're not, because we don't know from year to year what's going to happen. I mean, for instance, February, our rain gauge on Lake Lagunitas registered 0 inches, even with an extra day. 0 inches. And that's not great, because February is generally our highest rainfall month on the watershed. However, because we had a lot of rain in the beginning of the winter, we actually are above, I didn't put it on the slide, I think we're about 105, 108% average storage for this year. So we're in good shape with storage, even though we're only about 75% of the rainfall that we usually get on average this time of year. So basically, our water source is generally rainfall, no matter if it's here or the Russian River watershed, and so it's very dependent on that. And we'll go through this fairly quickly. So here's our different reservoirs. Basically, the point of this slide is our total reservoir capacity. If we get a lot of storms, if you see something in the paper, here's something that all the reservoirs are spilling, they're basically just giant bathtubs. They get to a certain point and they spill over. We can't, stop that. That's how they're designed. So if they're totally full and everyone is spilling, we have about 79,500 acre feet of water of storage. So basically, that's the size of a football field minus the end zones, a foot deep. And if you took all of our storage and put it on the football field, it'd be 79,500 feet tall, which is about 15 miles. And if you think about that, you might think, And if you saw that, you might think, that's enough water for 10 or 20 years for everybody. That's huge. Look at this column of water is huge. However, every single day we're drawing from those reservoirs to provide people with water. So we measure our rainfall in our storage in a fiscal year. So basically it goes from July 1st to June 30th, so it encompasses an entire winter. So the last data that we have, so basically we had a little under 25,000 acre feet that's produced, goes through a water treatment plant, goes into our system, and everybody uses it, you know, for showering, for washing their clothes, and for irrigation. But there's also other water that we have to release from our system for stream inflows, for fish habitat. We're required to do that. They say at one point, you know, we've dammed streams to make giant lakes for reservoirs, and so we need to release water for environmental reasons for fish. And that's going to vary. It was about 9,600 acre feet that last year. That varied by a couple thousand acre feet depending on.
Not just fish.
Yeah. Yeah, just for general environmental. There's other aspects too.
There are a few other species besides fish.
Yeah, there's shrimp, freshwater shrimp, some other things as well.
Yeah, not just animals.
Yeah. And so those two things together for that particular year was about 34,500 acre feet. And looking at our maximum storage, we say that's about a 2.5 year supply of water. Now, obviously, if there's a drought and certain targets, if our storage is at a certain level on April 1st, at or below, we start instituting, you know, voluntary rationing or even mandatory rationing or cutbacks or what have you. So that number's a little shaky, but that's generally what we say for our supply. Now, the reason again that we're promoting, you know, sustainable landscaping and, you know, native plants, and that generally can do that, we're reducing their irrigation rates because about 50% of our water use goes toward irrigation. A lot of that's overwatered. A lot of that's going to, obviously, not to non-climate appropriate plants. So that's a huge, huge portion of our water use, and the energy that's used to pump that water around as well. And so that's why we're doing this. Oh man, I'm going a lot faster than I thought I was going to. So I just want to talk about the, actually it's funny because I cut a bunch of slides out and I have so much time. What are we going to talk about? So I want to talk about the inspiration part of the book. Because that's really an important thing. It's really, if you were interested in gardening, you've probably seen something, somebody else's garden, pictures or what have you. You might have walked around the grounds today and saw a grouping of plantings and say, oh, that'd be great, I like these things. So this is an example of one day I was driving through my neighborhood in San Rafael, and I just decided to take a different street out of the neighborhood for whatever reason. And I passed this house. And I looked over and it didn't look like the house on this left, and its yard didn't look like the house on the right. I wish I would have taken a video, just driven down, and it just pops out. And so much to the fact that I stopped, and when none of the neighbors were looking, so they didn't think I was doing something nefarious, took out a camera and took a picture. I just loved it, again, because it's not just grass, not just turf. Picture doesn't do it justice. I should have probably zoomed in a little bit more. But it's just, to me, I thought it was beautiful, and I thought, wow, that's the kind of inspiring type of garden that's great in this kind of setting. So this happens to be my yard. Might look a little messy, but that's the way that, you know, it should really be. This was turf. This is a house, my first house. I just bought it 6 years ago. It was turf and some dying shrub and some other things. It was actually designed, when I looked at it, with low water use plants. They just weren't the plants that I wanted. I wanted to attract you know, pollinators. I wanted to attract hummingbirds. And so I put this in, and it's kind of one of those things that's kind of like, you know, when you put in a garden or a pollinator garden or whatever you want to attract, I found it to be very true that from the phrase, if you build it, they will come. If you build a baseball field in the middle of a cornfield, you might get baseball players showing up. And if you plant pollinator flowers or host plants, you will probably, I've learned, you will actually definitely get what you're looking for. So this is just a little, obviously you can figure out what this is, but this is something, the first year that I planted the garden, I put some milkweed and things in there for it because I wanted specifically to attract monarchs. And sure enough, I'd go out and I look out one day and there's a monarch flittering around the backyard, and I watch it go down the milkweed, and I just kind of watch it. Like, what's he doing? Is he laying eggs? What's going on? So about a week later, I kept checking, and sure enough, you see the little tiny, the first monarch caterpillars. And I'd go out with a little mother hen and I'd check them every day. How's everybody doing? What's going on? Watching them get bigger and bigger. And then they got nice and big, and then they started disappearing. I was like, I hope they've crawled off someplace and made a nice little home, which they did. So the far left there is the chrysalis of one. It's just about ready to emerge. I actually went around the yard. It was like an Easter egg hunt, and I found a dozen chrysalis underneath the eaves of the house, on different plants. And I kind of thought about it. I thought, man, that caterpillar was like this big, and it crawled like for its distance, like 1,000 miles. It's crazy. So I watched it, and I was lucky enough to come home from work one day, and I went out, mother hen, check and see what's going on, and so the one had just emerged from its chrysalis, and I went back a little later, and it was over on some sage sunning itself. So again, I'm confident in the kind of phrase, if you build it, they will show up. So talking about inspiration, this was, I just thought this was an interesting little thing that I came across. So I don't know if you can all see, but it says reward $300 for capture of plant thief by the Sonoma Police. This was actually in Sonoma. I drove there to meet a friend of mine, and I was like, oh, and there was a beautiful landscaped doctor's office, something like that. Not necessarily climate appropriate, but it was just beautiful. And I was like, oh, what does that sign say? And I walked over and I thought, wow, that's interesting. I wonder how many plants were stolen before they said, okay, we're gonna just put up a sign, say please do not. So the message here is, you might walk by a garden and take inspiration from it, but don't take the garden. That's the message I think they're saying. So actually, wow, so I went through that much faster than I thought I would. So I guess that's good. So I'm not going to be here for the panel, so if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them about the water supply or the plants, just whatever, sure.
Do you have any idea what the water use was for that garden that you liked in San Rafael compared to like the neighbors and other landscaping jobs?
I don't, but I'm going to guess based on the plant material there. I don't know, I'm going to guess, so turf grass here takes about 45 inches of water in the summer to stay green, like per square foot, you need for a column, 45 inches of water. So I'm going to guess with the plants that I saw, it's probably going to be at least a third. Only a third of that. So probably decrease the water use by at least 2/3. I wasn't bold enough to go knock on the door, and I thought it would be so intrusive to use my position at the district to go look back at the water use records. Just for the record. But I do, but it is interesting because I did go by, later on in the year, and after the bloom period was done and everything, I thought, oh, not as impressive now, but I know, what I actually haven't driven by recently, but I just knew, I was like, oh, that's like my yard, it looks great, and then some other things kind of, they go in their course that they're seeking. Sure.
In the list of 113 plants that you have in the back of the book, do you have any idea of how fire prone the plants are? I mean, it says how much water they use, but on the other hand,
that's a very good question. And the question was, with the plant list that we have in the back of the book, if we have any idea how many of those are fire prone, I think was the user question. And I will say this, that I did. So we put this book together kind of before all the attention going to fires and fire plants and plant lists and what have you. And basically from different meetings I've been in recently and talking to Fire State Marin and some other very educated people, I don't know if I should get into this because I'm certainly not an expert, but a lot of the aspects of flammability of the plants is how they are cared for. And not just the plant itself. You may have great plants that if they're cared for properly, or pruned, or just one specimen, it may be fine. But to get to your question, I cross-referenced it with the Fire State Marin plant list. There was one of our plants that were on, I think, their fire prone list, I guess you would say. I don't remember which one that was. I was kind of like, shh. pointless, not like half our pointless. But that's not necessarily to say that if you put that particular plant in your landscape, it's going to burst into flame. So a lot of it has to do with the care and the actual, more of the upkeep of the plants and how they're spaced and whatnot rather than the plant itself. But I'll say I'm certainly not, an expert on that. There's other people who are far more knowledgeable about that. Yep.
Yeah, my name's Rob Badger, I'm a conservation photographer. About 20 years ago, I did a project for the Eel River, for the Eel River, and their concern was the diversion of the eel into the Russian River. So I'm wondering, is there any way to tell how much we're getting from the eel? Because if we're getting it, because if there's a diversion to the Russian, are we getting any of that water, or is it just an unrealistic question to ask?
It's unrealistic for me. I actually don't know that question. That's an interesting question. I honestly don't know what percentage of water sometimes through there. The other slide that I showed is just kind of more of a high level of the we get 25% of our water annually from the Sonoma County Water Agency. So I don't know the answer to your question about what percentage of the Eel River. Sorry.
Thank you.
Keith, I was wondering if on the website, if there's any information on water catchment systems, cisterns, rain barrels for the consumer here.
Yeah, actually, we just been revamping some of our rebate programs, and so we did have a $50 rebate for basically a 100-gallon rain barrel. So that's been actually being revamped to. It's not official yet, but I think it's a week or two away from that. So that program has actually been revamped to actually pay, I think it's 50 cents per gallon of storage, up to 1,000 gallons of storage. We don't have a lot of information on, so it's basically just information on what we offer for rebate, not necessarily information on, water storage or rain barrels or what have you. And we are going to have, along with that, and thank you for that question because it reminds me of something else. So we're revamping our programs. They're not officially okayed yet by our board, but we're also going to have rebates for turf removal. I can't get into the details of it, but that should probably be out within the next couple of weeks and up on our website. There's good programs. Yes, sir.
I'm a distribution operator intern at Marin for the water district. So one of the things I was learning about is there's that tunnel, the long pipe that goes through, it's like water storage. Do you remember the name of that?
Pine Mountain Tunnel?
Can you
Yeah.
repeat the question, please? Please repeat.
He was saying works for actually for the water district, and he's asking about, I believe it's Pine Mountain Tunnel.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
So I think it holds about 200 million gallons of water, something like that. How much? Okay, a million gallons? Okay. So it holds 1 million gallons of water, and so the pipe's getting old. So I know there's been a lot of talk about what to do with that water in terms of there's a fire. So there's a lot of water there available in case there's a fire or if there's something going on. And so they're trying to figure out where to put it, like to maybe build another water storage facility. But since you're involved in the environment, I was wondering what your take is on that for that area in terms of protecting and dying from, if there's a fire or, what do you think needs to be done about that water storage area?
Well, basically, actually, we have a lot of facilities that need upkeep, and there's different things that are being revamped. And to the point of your question, basically, our system feeds, into all the fire hydrants, everything around throughout the area. So if you see a fire hydrant, that's basically just tapped into the main line that feeds the other areas. Regarding your question about basically infrastructure, that particular piece of infrastructure, we are constantly assessing that, and that's why there was just instituted a fairly unpopular fee on the water bill to raise money to pay for this kind of infrastructure and a bunch of basically deferred maintenance and deferred capital projects. So that's, I know what you're talking about. I unfortunately am sorry, I don't know the details of that because that's really outside of that's really kind of more the engineering department. But we're definitely looking at that. That's an issue. That is one of many infrastructure issues that needs to be addressed and looked at. But as far as your story is fire, that doesn't really, where we store the water, the different tanks, doesn't really, it's not really a concern about it being prepared to be able to fight fires.